Good morning, everybody. Here it is, Saturday morning, and I'm as bored as usual. But I decided to do. Some people have asked me for some stories from my past, and everybody knows out there that I can't spell worth a damn. And so, rather than repeat the story and type it out, I'm just going to throw up a little quick, a little quick video. It's much quicker, much better for me, easier, and gives me a chance to document what I say. And if I come up with some bizarre story, I'll always be able to document it. But everybody has these stories. Everybody, I'm 68. Everybody, I'm sure, has done much more in their life than I have. But this is an interesting story anyway. And this goes out to Plane Jet 42, who I was corresponding with for a while last night. And we were talking, he was filming some practice runs by some jets for an air show, I guess today or tomorrow in Cleveland. But I was telling him about how I helped bring about the change of every commercial jet engine in the world. A friend of mine, Captain W.L. Guthrie, was at the time was a senior pilot for Eastern Airlines, and he was the 37th pilot hired. And at the time, all the other 36 had retired, and he had more flying time than any other pilot working for Eastern Airlines. But he found that there was a I got to well go back up saying I got to know the guy because I'd been writing a bunch of columns prior to this about the first Earth Day, and he was a well-known environmentalist, and they asked him to do a burial on the campus of University of Miami, a time capsule, and he called me and asked me if it was all right if he included some photographs I had taken and some essays and some articles I'd written on the environment, which I was thrilled to death, of course, to let him pick that. I was honored, and I had just gotten done doing a couple of pretty good sized photo essays for the first Earth Day, so he buried him, and I got to meet the guy, a real nice guy. But anyway, uh, next thing I find out a couple of months later that his flight status has been terminated by Eastern Airlines, and this was the story behind that. And I hope I can finish it in 10 minutes, but it's such a good story. If I have to go on to part two, I will. Um, there was uh, the captain of the ship is responsible for all safety features, and that airplane does not take off without his approval. So I'm talking about airplanes, not boats, captain. Anyway, so he determined that there was a thing on a jet motor called a DP can, and what this can did was when the jet motor shut off, and jet motors they called jet fuel, but in those days it was just a high grade kerosene. Uh, it would recondense and it would drain into this DP can. But then when you went to take off, this fuel would be ejected from the motor and end up either on the runway or on on the windshield of the next plane following you. And he considered it a safety feature. And he found out that if you just took a hose and put it in a certain hole, I'm not a mechanic or anything, put it in a certain hole in this thing, and then had someone on the other end hold a bucket, you could drain this thing just by blowing through that hole. And before he would take off, he required it. Well, that caused a big bunch of problem with unions because the maintenance people said that was a maintenance job. The executive people said we're not sending maintenance people out because jet fuel in those days was probably 25 cents a freaking gallon, and it wouldn't pay to have someone over there holding the can. And Guthrie said I'm not taking off because it's a safety factor without draining it, and so they terminated his flight status. So when I read this in the Miami Herald, I got in touch with Guthrie and I said, "This is absolutely ridiculous. Let me see what I can do about it." And I instituted a boycott on Eastern Airlines. Now, let's see. Let me see here. I also had an organization called the Gadflies, and here's one of the articles where Captain Guthrie is there discussing the issue. Gadfly airs Guthrie versus Eastern Airlines. We had a representative from Eastern Airlines there, And here was my first article. Yeah, that was me. Yeah, nice, huh? Uh, Fight pollution, boycott Eastern Airlines. So you say, well, how can a little guy like me who has just an article in the paper, and this time I had a weekly radio show also, uh, uh, affect someone as large a corporation as large as Eastern Airlines? Well, this is how it works. There were literally thousands and thousands. Well, at the time, were 17,000 students at the University of Miami. Maybe 6,000 of them were from New York City, and a lot of them flew back and forth every week to to visit their parents. And the Eastern Airlines, as well as other airlines, had a ticket booth counter right on campus to facilitate this travel. So what I felt was here, students are notoriously don't want to give up anything, but they could help the environment and help Guthrie uh, by not flying Eastern Airlines because they could fly any of 4 or 5 other airlines, and it wasn't a matter of price because these were very, for the most part, very wealthy kids. So I thought, well, here we go, and within a week's time, we were costing Eastern Airlines $1 million a week. And it doesn't sound like that's not big money to Eastern Airlines. Eastern Airlines, their major hub at that time was in Miami. Uh, but we announced we got some coverage. We got the kids out there boycotting. A matter of fact, here's a shot of me at around Christmas of that year. You'll love this one. I'm dressed up as Santa Claus. That's my briefcase. I'll show you that. I still have that damn thing about 5 feet from here. And of course, it says boycott Eastern. And I rode around campus in a convertible, holding up my briefcase and telling everybody, saying it says boycott Eastern Airlines. But anyway, uh, we decided that we'd take it national and we were going to start to go down, picket their headquarters in downtown Miami when they apparently began to feel some pressure, put their engineers on the job, and found out that very cheaply they could plug that hole up in that motor, and that kerosene, or well, jet fuel, what they like to call it. Nobody wants to tell you you're flying on kerosene. Uh, would re-vaporize and be burned up and used to propel the jet. So that uh, for a matter of a couple of bucks, they could modify that jet motor, and that kept uh, Eastern happy. That kept the pilot behind the jet in front of him. That kept him happy. Kept the fuel from making the runway slippery. And this is one case where everybody was happy. And within a year's time, every commercial jet engine in the world was so modified, and literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of gallons of jet fuel uh, went back to serving the purpose it was supposed to, and not on the runways and not on the windshields. So any little guy can bring about change. And what they reinstated Captain Guthrie. They made him. This is the way corporations operate. He had 3 more years left before he retired. They reinstated his flight status, and they hired him as their environmental consultant and paid him his normal salary and never called on him to give a lecture or anything. So for the next 3 years, he did nothing but live on his avocado farm in South Miami. So Guthrie was happy, I was happy, and the environment made out pretty well. Now here's a little side note. I got a call from him one morning, and I used to go out there and when I was in Miami, and maybe once a week they'd have me out to dinner. Very interesting family. Well, his daughter, turns out, he calls me one morning. This is a couple of years after I left the University of Miami. I'm back in New Jersey, and he calls me and says, "Watch the Today Show. Janet's going to be on the Today Show." So this is his daughter, and many a time his daughter would pick me up and take me out to the house in South Miami, as I had no transportation to to go uh, to go out for dinner. Well, I look on the Today Show, and here it's the Janet Guthrie that was the first woman ever to race at Indianapolis. And that's another little side story that maybe I'll tell sometime. But what an interesting family, and it just proves that if you put your mind to it, and it doesn't take much effort, that you can make some changes that are beneficial. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Jet Plane Jet 42 for get me interested enough and ask me the question. And if anybody else, most people, this is a waste of their time, but this is the way I'm going to answer a lot of questions now. Thank you for your attention and signing off.